every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
President-elect Donald John Trump in the dark early hours of Wednesday, November 9th, 2016, promising to make the country great again for everyone, he said. It is not yet clear how he will try to do that, because this long, unruly campaign had become more about character than policy, more about the emotions underlying issues like immigration than about realistic plans. And welcome to POTUS 2016. I'm Brian Lehrer. However designed, big policy changes are on the horizon, and shortly we'll discuss their possible impact. After the surprising and stunning loss, Hillary Clinton waited until the sun rose again, then gracefully conceded defeat, calling on her supporters, especially young people, to continue to fight for what's right.
I know how disappointed you feel, because I feel it too. And so do tens of millions of Americans who invested their hopes and dreams in this effort. This is painful, and it will be for a long time. But I want you to remember this. Our campaign was never about one person or even one election. It was about the country we love and about building an America that's hopeful, inclusive, and big-hearted. We have seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought. But I still believe in America, and I always will. And if you do, then we must accept this result and then look to the future. Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead. Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power. And we don't just respect that, we cherish it. It also enshrines other things: the rule of law, the principle that we are all equal in rights and dignity, freedom of worship and expression. We respect and cherish these values too, and we must defend them.
No, the highest and hardest glass ceiling has not been shattered. But in the course of the campaign, the Republican Party fractured, and now the Democrats must rebuild as well. Both will have to look carefully at the issues, divisions, and demographics behind Tuesday's results. We can begin to do that even now. First, some numbers. With 95% of the votes in, Donald Trump has won 279 Electoral College votes to Hillary Clinton's 228. But it appears that Clinton will win the popular vote by a razor-thin margin of about 0.2%. Basically, both Trump and Clinton got 48% of the popular vote. Tuesday's loss was a resounding defeat for Democrats, who have long thought that the country's changing demographics would work against Trump, a sentiment that appeared to be backed by science from a community of pollsters and forecasters tracking the election. But there was one thing pollsters did get right: the importance of voter turnout. According to the U.S. Elections Project, general election voter turnout was the lowest since 2004, as just 56% of the eligible voting population cast a ballot. It's a trend that worked to Trump's benefit. Turnout did surge among Latinos in Colorado, Arizona, Florida, and Nevada, but only 65% of those Latinos supported Clinton, while 29% voted for Trump. In 2012, Romney secured only 27%. Yes, Trump did better with Latinos than Romney. So, with roughly 1 in 3 Latinos breaking for Trump, Trump was able to deliver the key state of Florida and set the stage for a Republican bulldozing of Clinton's blue firewall, as it was called, by another important surge in voter turnout: working-class whites. According to Harry Enton over at 538, the worst polling errors occurred in states where white, non-college educated voters made up most of the white electorate. White men and women without a college degree represented a third of the electorate Tuesday. According to exit polling, Trump won over these voters by a 39-point margin, moving well beyond Mitt Romney's 25 points in 2012. With economic issues driving their decision, Trump was able to plow through the Rust Belt states, notching a big win in Ohio and upsets in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Looking deeper, 47% of Ohio voters said trade hurts workers and backed Trump by more than a 2-to-1 margin. In Pennsylvania, more than half agreed that trade is bad for jobs, and 62% of them supported Trump. And in Michigan, half of the electorate felt that trade took away jobs, 57% of them supporting Trump. It appears that the GOP came home to a candidate who happened to cater to mobilized working-class whites. Hillary looked tied to Wall Street and against the basket of deplorables, which many working-class whites took to mean them. So how might all this play out in the coming 4 years? Joining me on the phone from Canada, David Frum, senior editor of The Atlantic, former George W. Bush speechwriter, longtime Republican who this year urged voters to support Hillary Clinton. David, you went to Canada already?
Actually, I'm about to board a plane heading back. I'm not in exile. I was just here commenting on CBC News.
Okay, just making sure. Somebody I know did text me last night, Vancouver or Toronto, suggesting we move there, even though that was a joke. So what happened, David, and did you see it coming?
I certainly did not see it coming. I thought I was saying something clever when I told people that I believed the election would be closer than the polls indicated, but I never imagined that any result other than a Clinton victory. As I said, I never believed that she was going to make it in Arizona and Georgia and places like that, but I did assume that she would win Pennsylvania. So I'm as surprised as anybody, and I can't claim any special foresight into the future.
How much of this do you think was gender bias, intentional or unintentional? In other words, that people judged Hillary Clinton being a regular politician more harshly than they would have judged some guy being a regular politician?
Look, I want to say this result is on the voters and the American people, but I think any attempt to create an excuse for Hillary Clinton is sorely misplaced. And one of the things that, to those, as I voted for her as the lesser evil, but to those of us who find her a difficult person to accept, one of the most irritating aspects of the Clinton personality is that she does things that are shocking by any measure. The idea that that the Clintons sold access to their past and future presidency for for assets totaling almost $250 million that she spent the first 2 years when she ought to have been working hard to win election, that she spent the first 2 years out giving 60 speeches for a total of $18 million. And she would then say, after this, when people said, that's kind of objectionable behavior, well, you only say that because I'm a woman. I don't know whether the reaction to her financial practices is greater than it would have been for a man who did the same thing. But the point is, it's unacceptable. And the fact that she got some extra serving of unacceptability for things that are unacceptable, even if that were true, I don't find that interesting. I mean, the fact is, she did things that were unacceptable, and now the whole republic will pay the price.
And you wrote in your endorsement of her, your very reluctant endorsement of her in The Atlantic, that you, as a Republican and with the values that you have, would probably disagree with her on almost every important issue, and yet you were going to vote for her. So you must be really afraid of some things that you think Donald Trump is going to do. Can you enumerate some?
Well, in fact, I was on Twitter this morning and literally enumerated them by a count of 10. And let me tell you what I'm most afraid of. I think the evidence strongly supports that Donald Trump's first interest, and really his supreme interest, is always the self-enrichment by any means, fair or foul. In fact, there's evidence he prefers the foul means. Nobody has ever explored the self-enrichment possibilities of the occupancy of the presidency, but Donald Trump is about to do it. And the other thing we know about him is he can't abide criticism of any kind, and he's incredibly vindictive. As he says, he believes if someone screws you, screw them back 10 times as hard. His practices are going to give rise to scandal. They're going to be unethical. He's going to be licensing his brand while serving as president. That's a way to direct for any foreign leader who wants to direct bribes directly to the family of the president. So there's going to be reaction. And when there is that reaction, his instinct is going to be to suppress criticism. He will very likely have a new FBI director to appoint after James Comey resigns, which in other circumstances you would say he should. But, and we are going to see him build a structure of retaliation and repression in order to protect his business practices. I'm really worried about that.
You think Comey's going to resign?
At this point, I hope he does not, because I think any successor will be worse. I think he should resign. I think what happened, what the FBI did, was unconscionable, and we'll all be losers for it. But this is one of those, again, the lesson of this year to all my Bernie bot friends is always remember, you vote for the least of, you make the adult choice for the lesser evil. And Comey behaved badly. His successor will behave worse.
And we should remember, in case you're wondering why there would be any question about whether Comey would resign with a new president coming in, the FBI director structurally has some independence from the rest of the government and is appointed for a 10-year term, just by way of background.
Exactly.
So,
Right.
David, is the Republican Civil War that everybody was predicting for after a Trump loss canceled?
It's ending with abject submission. This is like an Appomattox moment. There's a lot of phoniness about this. I just was watching Paul Ryan on television talking about how he completely supported Donald Trump's populist agenda for the common man, which is a whole series of comic expressions right there. But Donald Trump will give the House and Senate Republicans enough of what they want to buy their consent for what he most wants.
Such as?
Well, I think what he's going to want is impunity for his business practices. Let me just give you an example.
You keep coming back to that. You really think he's going to use the White House to enrich himself first and foremost, rather than get certain things done like building a wall?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump just doesn't have political ideas. Anyway, and what is going to happen with the wall is it's very rapidly going to become a fence, and then it's rapidly going to become a network of censors, and then it's rapidly going to look like stuff we're doing already. And with his immigration policy, he's going to begin by promising to round up and deport people, and it's going to rapidly devolve into something more like what any other Republican would have done. In that way, he's not going to be distinctive. What may be distinctive is that we're going to have a bigger tax cut than we otherwise would, and we'll have more spending. We're likely to have a big infrastructure program with an eye to putting blue-collar men into well-paid work, and we're likely to have bigger deficits than we otherwise would have, because I think he's going to be a spender. But that's not what is distinctive and interesting to him about the presidency. He wants power, he wants prestige, he wants status.
And what will he give Paul Ryan?
Almost all of Paul Ryan's domestic agenda, which Paul Ryan was not going to be able to deliver for himself. You are going to look. This is going to what is coming now is going to be 1965 in reverse. Republicans are going to among the first orders of business.
That was Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty that you're referring to?
Right. In 1965, we saw a burst of domestic activism that dwarfs anything. Maybe 2000, what President Obama did in 2009 sort of equals it. Civil rights and Medicare and Medicaid and the war on poverty and the beginnings of federal environmental legislation. So we're going to have a lot of that in reverse. We're going to see, I think, basically the repeal of Obamacare. We're going to see a giant tax cut. We're going to see a big infrastructure program. And those things are going to proceed. We're going to see, by the way, the rapid confirmation of a net justice of the Supreme Court as well, confirming Republican control over all the branches of government. And the next President Trump, President-elect Trump, will probably be able to appoint one or two more, making the Republican majority not 5-4, but 6-3.
David, stay there. We're going to bring on two additional guests. Joining us is New York's Manhattan Borough President Gale Brewer, a Hillary backer from day one, and on her support team, the New York Leadership Council. And via Skype from Maryland, columnist and journalist Marcela Valdes, who has been researching and writing about the Latin vote, including an in-depth piece for the New York Times. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Thank you, Brian.
And I actually want to play a clip because David Frum just mentioned infrastructure as one of the things that Donald Trump might give Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, in a deal. And here's a clip of Donald Trump talking about that policy.
We are going to fix our inner cities and rebuild our highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, schools, hospitals. We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, which will become, by the way, second to none. And we will put millions of our people to work as we rebuild it.
So, Gale Brewer, could this be good for New York? When you talk about a big infrastructure plan, that sounds like Barack Obama. That sounds like Franklin Roosevelt.
Well, certainly we need airports and highways, and don't forget, we want our subway system. Sometimes it's highways and not public transit. So yes, it sounds good. We all need to have the bridges and the roads improved. And I remember during the campaign, that was the one issue that Trump and Clinton agreed on. I might have been the only issue. So yes, I think it's a good thing. How it's done, who gets what. I mean, it has been discussed in the past, and we've always had the short end of the stick. Highways came first, transit second. Of course, transit is more important from the environment and moving people and urban America.
So, David Frum, are we talking about two different kinds of infrastructure programs? I'm a little confused. Why would Paul Ryan want that? I thought that's just the kind of thing Paul Ryan blocks.
I'm sorry, I didn't give that as one of the things that Paul Ryan would get. I thought that was one of the things that Donald Trump would want to do. What Paul Ryan gets is a big tax cut. He gets the repeal of Obamacare. He gets judicial appointments. I think that deal is pretty clear. That Donald Trump has said he'll take advice from the regular Republicans on who he should put on the courts. He'll have his own interest in making sure that whoever gets on the court will look with a charitable eye on any investigations of Donald Trump. He's got the Trump University fraud case coming to a head. But somebody who's strong on defensive property, weak on government ethics, that person will be our next Supreme Court justice.
Got it. Marcela Valdes, I'll come to you in just a second to react to this clip of Trump from his middle-of-the-night victory statement, talking about how he sees what he just ran as more than a campaign.
As I've said from the beginning, ours was not a campaign, but rather an incredible and great movement made up of millions of hardworking men and women who love their country and want a better, brighter future for themselves and for their family.
Marcela Valdes, is it a movement? And if it is a movement, is it a scary one to Latinos and Latinas?
I think it depends which Latinos and Latinas you're talking to. So I think that many people are very frightened, especially, for example, DACA recipients, since the DACA executive orders were probably one of the first things that will fall.
That's the dreamers, the younger undocumented immigrants who President
children
Obama...
who were brought to the United States when they were minors, some of them very, very young, some of them babies, some of them toddlers, some of them who have no memories of living anywhere except in the United States. If DACA is repealed, then those children, some of whom are now adults, are in danger of being deported to countries that they barely know.
And Trump could do that with a snap of his fingers, right? Because it was a presidential order in the first place, not an act of Congress.
He can do it in the first 5 minutes in office. It's just a matter of signing a piece of paper. It was an executive order. So this is some of the dangers of having passed things by executive order, or some of the drawbacks of having passed things by executive order. So I think that, yes, there are many Latinos who are really quite frightened about what a Donald Trump presidency. However, I also think that people have vastly underestimated, as you pointed out earlier in the show, the number of Latinos who supported him and who were in favor of him. When I think about this, I remember an El Salvadorian immigrant whom I met in Virginia. His name was Mario. He worked in construction. He had 2 sons who were born in the United States. And he was planning to vote for the first time in November. And he was planning to vote for Trump, even though his own wife is undocumented. For Mario, the most important issues were jobs, and crime. Law and order sounded very good to him. Pushing out more recent immigrants from Latin America sounded pretty good to him too, because he was competing against them for jobs. I mean, he himself had been undocumented before Reagan's 1986 amnesty, but that didn't matter to him now.
So, Gale Brewer, is this a movement, or is this just a reactionary backlash to a country becoming less white?
Well, when I heard the Mr. Trump make that comment, I was mortified, because it did sound to me it was just a certain group of people. Yes, some Latinas, but primarily the white community. When we drive upstate and other parts of the country, all the places that we saw the Trump signs, that was the movement that I heard when Donald Trump mentioned his movement. It did not include, in my opinion, urban America, which is the majority of Americans. It did not include this coalition. Many, many more Latinos were registered this time and did turn out. And there were obviously many other communities of color, all kinds, that are now registered and voting for the first time. I saw it with my own eyes, obviously in New York, but across the country. So he is talking, in my mind, his movement is a very small type of person. It is not the browning of America, which is taking place.
And mostly his votes came from rural areas and the exurbs. But do you have any optimism that he might get what New York, his hometown, needs, and by extension, people in other cities around the country?
I don't know that he understands urban America, even though he is from the real estate community of Queens and Manhattan. And certainly, be clear, Manhattan did not vote for him, his own home county, as we know, either in the primary or now. But the issue is, for urban America, it is definitely infrastructure, but it is also healthcare, it is also food stamps, it is also housing, affordable housing. Is he going to understand that issue?
David Frum, I know you have to leave in a minute. What comes next in the Democratic Party? I know you're a Republican, but what do you think comes next in the Democratic Party? Are they going to have an unscheduled civil war?
I think two things, maybe three. The thing that comes first is a lot of recrimination against both the Clinton campaign and the Clinton family personally. I think a lot of Democrats have been biting back their unease with the ethical practices of the Clinton family. They are now going to wonder, why did you give so many speeches at Goldman Sachs and so few in Wisconsin? What was your real priority? That they're going to say those things that they've been thinking about themselves. The next thing is they're going to start thinking. I think there's going to be a real discussion of the kind of party they want to be. There'll be people on the left who say Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren could have won this election. There will also be people who note, I now forget, I'm sorry, which of the two other guests told the story of the El Salvadoran immigrant who spoke of crime. One of the ideas that Democrats have always had is that they can be a rainbow coalition that could conclude all so many different kinds of ethnic groups that are dissatisfied in the same coalition. It turns out those groups may dislike each other, or many of those groups may dislike each other more than they dislike their Republican opponents. And Democrats are going to have to rethink the easy assumption that all the pieces of their coalition easily fit together.
I would take issue with a little bit of that, just in the sense that I don't think that the point is that they see Republicans as their opponents. I think that Latinos in America can be as diverse in their political viewpoints as any other ethnic group, including non-Hispanic whites. So when they are voting for Trump, they don't think of voting for their opponents. They are thinking that they are voting for the person who represents their values. That's not the majority of Latinos, but it is obviously a sizable percentage.
David Frum, thanks a lot. Come on back into the country. Don't forget your passport, or you might get deported. Just kidding. Thank you. Do you think, Gale Brewer, that Bernie Sanders, even though you were a Clinton supporter during the primaries too, might have won this election?
I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit 20/20 hindsight. Obviously, I have many friends who are Bernie supporters, many friends who were Clinton supporters. We did come together, I felt, before the convention and work together. Bernie Sanders, and you hear this from the press, and Trump hit a nerve in terms of people who are disaffected. But I will point out, when Obama was in office, at the beginning, there were 14 Republican governors. Now there are 31 Republican governors. So you had the question of what could the Democrats do? We have to work on this pipeline. I mean, some of my colleagues in government, Democrats and Republicans, are not model citizens. But when I say that, I don't mean the corruption so much. That's an issue. We have to focus on the everyday issues of Americans. In other words, of what I call in New York the quality of life. That might be something different in a small town, but it means how you can survive. Does government respond to your needs every single day? Does the Department of Motor Vehicles make it easy for you to get your driver's license? Or in New York City, do we pay attention to making sure that you can get an affordable apartment? Those kinds of issues have to be the bread and butter. We don't forget pro-choice, we don't forget gay rights, we don't forget human rights, ever. And certainly we don't forget immigration. But all these other issues we need to have more of a focus on, and we have to build this pipeline of good Democrats to be elected.
Marcela, do you think there's any opportunity for Donald Trump to start bringing the country together in a new kind of way? After all, we've been polarized along party lines for a long, long time. He's seen as such a divisive force, but does he have an opportunity because of the way the parties would have to realign now to bring us together, or are you not optimistic?
Of course there's an opportunity. I have lots of apprehensions though, and my apprehensions have to do with things that David Frum mentioned, particularly what his reaction to dissent might look like. What if he makes an opportunity to unite and people do not want to unite behind his policy? How will he react to a dissenting force like the kind that W. Bush faced when he was a presidency? We've seen a lot of aggressive behavior towards journalists at his rallies, sometimes aggressive verbal comments from Trump himself. So I'm very apprehensive about not his effort to unify, but what his reaction to resistance to unity under his policies might look like.
Marcela Valdes, thank you for joining us. Gale Brewer, thank you very much for joining us. It's the beginning of a new and unexpected era in the United States. And that's POTUS 2016 for today. We'll be here each week at this hour, delving into the decisions that will come to or emerge from President Trump's desk. That will include jobs, taxes, trade, race, justice, climate change, education, war and peace, and of course, the wall. Thanks for watching all these months during the campaign, and stick with us as we move forward, throwing cold, hard facts on the overheated political rhetoric. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.